Hey guys, welcome to Miyagi Mornings, episode 44. And it is a Thursday morning, and hopefully it won't be too windy and mess up the audio quality in today's episode. I'm trying to enjoy my time outside. Even though we're going to have gusting winds over 30 miles an hour today, it's going to be pretty warm. It's going to be okay through the weekend. And then, that Arctic blast that's fixing to knock you guys up in the Midwest down to like negative 20 degrees, it's going to get here and we're going to be around positive 20 degrees. It's cold for Dallas, Fort Worth area of Texas. It's not cold for ducks, but it is cold for chickens and baby chickens. And we got a dead-gone chicken incubating eggs in the middle of this. Just a little update on the farmstead. Today I want to talk to you about a permaculture principle called appropriate technology and what it does and doesn't mean and how it applies to things like housing. So let's start off with what it isn't. There are a significant number of what I consider invaders of the permaculture movement that believe that permaculture was founded for the purpose of enacting some sort of leftist utopia. It's also heavily infested with vegans, and if you get it, I've always said if you're a vegan and you respect my lifestyle, I respect yours. If you were a vegan and you came to my home, I would make you for dinner the best vegan meal you would ever have. And I would sit there and eat a steak and hope you're okay with it, because if you're not, you can get out of my house, right? So when I say that, I don't mean that about anybody that makes that dietary choice. You know who the people I'm talking about are. If you can't understand it, you're probably on the wrong channel. Well, these people we call them purple breathers in the world of permaculture, and they have this twisted idea of what the movement's all about, so they want to drag politics into it. And I think if you're a left-wing extremist or right-wing extremist, anything in between, an anarcho individual like myself, there's room for everybody. But you can't change the technology, you can't change the design science, and that's what this is really all about. So the reason I even bring that up, there's people that think appropriate technology would mean something like we shouldn't use machinery or mechanization or automation or anything that eliminates jobs because the appropriate technology gives people who need a job a job. I don't know where you get that from. Appropriate technology means what do you have available, what are you trying to do within the limits of what you have available, and when do you go to, let's say, an outside input in a situation where we're talking about housing anyway. So what made this one come out is I've been putting up a bunch of movies really on Cobb housing on my Odyssey channel, which if you're sitting here on YouTube, you should totally go check out. And so somebody emailed me and said, are you saying like everybody now should build Cobb houses because, they're environmentally friendly, whatever? And the answer is no. Do you know what it would be to build a Cobb house on this property if I didn't already have a house here? Stupid. Because I would literally have to import almost every single thing to build that house with. The reason Cobb housing makes so much sense is probably about 70% of the land that people choose to live on is made up of a clay and sand mixed soil. That's why they make sense. Because right under your feet, everywhere you go, there's the material to make your wall, your floor, your facade, whatever part that's going to play in your housing, it's right there. And in most places where people live, there is timber that's available for framing of door frames and roof joists and stuff like that. And if that's all you're doing, you need a lot less of it. And since you're going to build a house, if you're in a place where there's some timber growing anyway, you're probably going to have to take some down to put the house in. So it's all right there. About the only thing you might have to bring in is straw, and most places where all this is going on, there's straw not that far away, and there's enough water to do the mixture. So this all makes sense. And that's appropriate technology. I want you to think about it this way. Right here, you guys see this? This is a cattle panel. Now imagine this was a fence, and I could stick my arm way through that fence. Let's say on the other side, there's a fence built out of this stuff, and on the other side of it, there was a thing that I wanted, right? Because we got to understand what technology means. It means putting things together that wouldn't happen all by themselves with the intention of making something else happen. That's the way we're looking at technology here. And I wanted that thing, and I could almost reach it. I'm like, just barely, you're doing little creepy fingers, and God, if I could just stretch one more inch. And I look down next to me, and there's a stick. But I think, you know what, Self? Last night I saw an infomercial for a grabber to get stuff down from high places. It's made in China, and it probably lasts about 2 months of use before it falls the hell apart. But if I order now, I can get 2 for the price of 1. Just pay a separate shipping fee, whatever that means, right? So I think, you know what I'll do? I'll go order the grabber. It has to be shipped. Here comes the jets, right? So I'll order a grabber that has to be shipped in a container across the vast Pacific Ocean from China, warehoused, and then, good Lord, I think I'll edit that out for the podcast version. Let's let them get over us. telling you they know. All right, so it has to be shipped in, then it has to be shipped again, then it goes to a warehouse, then it comes to my house, then I finally get it, then I take this thing that only serves one purpose, and I go get that item. You think I'm an idiot. Like, when I put it that way, you like, who would do, there's a stick right there. Pick the stick up, it's appropriate technology, it does the job, it's readily available, use it. Well, when we go into a place where all the material we need to build a house is, and then we bring in, southern pine from Louisiana all the way up to like Idaho, that doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make sense all of a sudden just because it's eco-friendly housing. So if you live in a place where there's plenty of stone, almost no clay, right? But lots of timber, a stone and timber frame house would be the appropriate technology for the area. If you look at the way humans have lived, housing was highly dependent on local resources when there weren't semi-trucks to bring it into you. So when does it make sense to bring in materials and still consider it appropriate technology? When the goals that you have are such that you cannot do it where you are. So if we start out from the standpoint of building a house, right? What's the goal? The primary goal is to create a shelter for humans to exist in outside of the effects of nature. There's probably 100 secondary and 1,000 tertiary goals we can add to that, but that's the primary goal. So can we accomplish that with what we have? Then we start looking at secondary goals. I want it to look nice. I want it to be reactive housing, meaning that when I need to be warm, I want it to automatically be warmer inside than it is outside. And when I need it to be cool, I want it to be automatically cooler inside than outside. Can I do that with what I have? And if I can, then I should start down that path. Am I able to do it? What's the scale of permanence? Is there if I have this piece of land and the regulations say I can't do what I want to do, then I have to adapt to and design around that limitation. That's really high. Like, regulations and laws and codes are just below mountains on the scale of permanence. They're very hard to change. It happens, but I can't bet on it. Do I live in a place where I just don't have the materials to do what I want, or what I want to do is not doable? Behind me is a great big 4,400 gallon pond. I get so much out of that pond, it's totally worth building. If I could dig a hole here, there wouldn't be a 4,400 gallon pond. There'd be about, on my 3 acres, I'd have about an acre of water in various in-ground ponds that would use no materials that were brought in, because that would be appropriate technology. I'd have bigger ponds that would give me more and cost me less and require no inputs. Why do I have that? Because about 6 inches below where I'm standing right now is slab rock. And it's ugly limestone that looks like concrete, and then it's a slab that looks like a sarcophagus. And I couldn't go down 1 foot, so that's how far I went down, and I built up. If you wanted this look, because let's say you lived in a neighborhood where you can do this, but you can't put it in a pond, right? Then if you can dig, it would make a lot of sense. Maybe that's only a foot high back there. That's a lot less brought in, and you've gone down. If you live in a place where you can put an in-ground pond, and the only input you need to bring in is like bentonite clay, that's a much more sustainable long-term input, and it's a much more natural tool. So then that would be the case. Whatever situation we're in, we need to evaluate, again, first the primary goals, then the materials that can accomplish those primary goals, and then the secondary goals. You know why there's cattle panels making an arch over my head right here? Because when I built this, I had no intention when I first started designing the system that I'm standing underneath right now to put in a panel. I looked at this system and said, now how do we put annual gardens around it in the most space-conscious, easy-to-maintain way that makes sense? And when I put it down on graph paper and put it to scale, this result that's kind of like a mix of like Victorian and Asian influence. Not because I tried to do that, because that's what worked. It was appropriate technology. And then I was like, Self, what other resources do you have on this property? And I remembered I had 4 of these cattle panels. They were just laying over there up against one of my water tanks. I didn't even buy them. They came from the neighbor who bought them for some other reason and decided they didn't want them anymore and got rid of them. So it made real sense to take that existing resource, an existing design, and put the two together. And the function stacking is appropriate technology. And the only way this is appropriate technology, if it's not recycled, because I'm going to buy some in for more for a project that we're doing in March. I have to get more energy out of the production that this enables than went into making it and transporting it to me. And it might take 5 or 7 years for me to do that, but I'm confident I can, so that I will. We need to start thinking differently too with this. We need to be thinking about, if I'm building a house, well, I should build a house that my great-grandchildren could live in. That's worth doing. I should try to build a house that I don't have to rely on debt to have. There's a lot of things that play into that. And then I also, again, have to take reality into question. People might be then like, Jack, why don't you build a natural structure? Here come the frickin' jets again. Well, because I bought this house for a song for what it is. I paid so much less for this property than it's worth because I used another appropriate technology called negotiation skills, and it already has a house on it. To take that house down out of some ego trip would be a waste of that resource. It's better that we do things like, well, since it was orientated perfectly to the south, well, what we did is we glass walled that whole south wall with great big windows so that I use almost no heating energy in the winter. We have to get into the 20s and stay in the 20s to really need to use the heat much at all. We generally keep our thermostat in the winter in the low 60s. If we do get a little chilly, we might turn it up for a couple of minutes, and as soon as the house warms up, we turn it back down. And that is modifying what we had to be better. And if we could have done that in a way using recycled materials that looked good, we would have done it. But we couldn't because we have to preserve the value of the home in case we have to sell it. That's another reality that comes in to checking all of this. And you need to be thinking about this to where we do it with as much ethics as we can, but an acceptance of the reality that we live in, the scale of permanence with things like codes and regulations, and preserving resale value. Here's another example. If I lived in a part of Texas and I had a vacant piece of land and I didn't have materials to build my own home, I would seriously consider having the material that brought in would be concrete, and I'd make a dome home. Because I live in Tornado Alley, and an F4 tornado can hit that with direct impact, and it doesn't even care. You could sit in the living room and go, gee, there goes my windows, otherwise I'm good. That makes a lot of sense because that home will be there when my great-great-great-grandchildren are around. But I have to consider, is this my forever home? Because resale is a bitch because how appraisals work. All of that has to be factored into what you're doing. But that's what appropriate technology is all about. Now, the lesson from today's Miyagi mornings is not how to choose the materials to build your home with. It's how to take any project that you ever want to do on your property or on a property you're helping with and evaluate what are my resources, what am I trying to do, and how can I bring the appropriate technology to this thing, no matter what it is. Hopefully, that gets the mind going because you know what that makes you do? Evaluate your resources. And you start to realize how much you have available and you start using those first. And I think it'd be interesting if we appropriately used the resources we had available before we went out of bounds to get resources from elsewhere. With that, been Jack Spirko with another episode of Miyagi Mornings. Hope you enjoyed it. Remember, this is good on YouTube and better on my Odyssey channel.